We're back from recess. We left off on our second round. I believe Senator Shelton, Legislative Secretary, yeah, you were next. Huh? Oh, sure, give to him.
To him. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have no questions at this time. I want to thank the panel, and I yield my time to the Chair of Education.
Thank you. Senator Blas, round two.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you once again to the panel. And I guess the million-dollar question here. Well, first off, I know, Mr. Swanson, GDOE, you had broken schools up into 3 different categories, phase 1, 2, and 3. Were those phases based on what you would perceive to be schools that were going to be inspected and pass the inspection previous to Marwar, or did Marwar play an influence into the categorization of those phases?
We're taking the conditions post-Marwar.
Post-Marwar.
Yeah, because regardless of how they got the way they are the way they are.
Has there been a study of the assumption that if we did not have Marwar, would there have been the category or phase 3 schools that would have been phase 2 and phase 2 that would be phase 1?
Yes, I believe so.
What would those numbers have been today had we not had Typhoon Marwar? Where would we be at today with?
We would be farther into the inspection process for sure, because that slowed everything down. And then the other piece of it is the funding side, because we had the typhoon, we have funding available to make repairs that we would not have had otherwise. So we would be working on the problem, but with a lot fewer resources.
Okay. Well, speaking of the funding, you know, one of the sections of the bill is the small purchase limit at $250,000. This is the assumption. First off, my understanding, you already have that ability with ARPA and ESF?
Yes,
So-
we did.
So it was just a matter of, well, when you decide to combine ARPA with general fund money. Now the question is, this body had given you or appropriated, I think the sum of $20 million. How much of that $20 million have you received yet?
Take that. We haven't had access to that at this point.
So it's kind of interesting, because if we give you the authority to be able to do this, of which you already have for existing funds, and you can't use that statute or this section of the law unless you had the local funds, but you don't have the local funds. It's like, thank you, but no thank you. Mr. Cooper-Nurse?
Senator, you're absolutely right. So given the circumstances that we have the ability with our USAID grants to have that provision at 250, putting that language in the law now will specifically be aimed at having local funds, but we would have to have the local funds readily available. And as our superintendent said, we did have the access to the 20 million. We tried our earnest, and we're still working in that process to have access to avail of a specific provision in law that this body is trying to introduce in this new bill.
Okay. Well, you know, at no fault to this legislature and to the author of the bill and everything, I can understand why this would have been a perfect tool had you had that opportunity with the $20 million, right?
That's correct. And again, had we had access to the $20 million, the mode and everything as a result that exasperated the school conditions would have been in process.
Okay. Public health. Question that I have with regard to, as it stands right now with 3704, obviously this is the main impetus as to why these inspections are occurring and whatnot is to be in compliance with 3704. Am I correct?
I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear you.
The inspections that are ongoing now were as a result of the impetus of 3704.
That's correct. 'Cause
Okay.
the inspections would need to be conducted prior to the renewal of sanitary permit for GDOE schools.
And I don't want to flog a dead horse nor sound like this is a iteration of a question that was asked of you time and time and time again. It's just that we need to be able to say this time and time and time again. Based on what you currently have to work with, your assets, based on what even if you were to give you these tools with regards to hiring new prospects. This morning, I think there was a conversation in the hearing where you can possibly bring back one retiree, possibly, and that it'll take about 2 to 3 months to be able to train up other inspectors from other agencies, recognizing too that the other agencies have their own inspection priorities, in other places. What would be your best guess as to when you'll be able, let's assume that all the schools have passed inspection, first time around, okay? What would be your earliest possible conceivable time that all the schools will be back up into compliance? Or at least, let's make it this way. Of 39 campuses, let's take half of that. Okay? 20 campuses.
Okay. And the question is how
How long would it take for you
to inspect them?
to inspect them, and with the assumption that all of them pass inspections?
Well, out of that 20, I think we're at 7. Let's just think about where we're at right now. And so that would leave roughly, 12 or 13 schools left to inspect to meet that 20 demand. And if we're going to do that at 3 schools a week, what we're looking at, that's like, 3 weeks? If as things stand now with the resources that are available to me today, it would be close to 3 weeks, because you're saying, what do we say? We said 20 schools, which was roughly half of your 39, right?
Right.
And we've inspected 7, I think maybe 8. So that would leave you what, at 12, 13 schools. So you're looking at 3 schools a week, about 3, 6, 9, maybe a little bit longer than that. So maybe 3.5 weeks, something like that. And that's assuming, of course, all these schools pass in order to get their sanitary permit renewed. That's kind of where we're at.
Okay.
The additional resources that we may be able to get, there could be a possibility to increase, but I would anticipate at most 2.5 weeks as opposed to 3.5 weeks.
Okay. And what if a school were to fail? What are you basically? What's the next step in as far as getting them to get re-inspected? Is there a timeline, or is there something that you have to follow based on statute or regulation?
Yes. So if whether school fails or passes, there is a timeline set forth in our regulations based on two factors, which is first scoring. So if you scored, I believe, 20 demerits or less, then you have up to 30 days to remedy those items cited. If it's more, that's like 21 or more demerits, then you'd have even less days. You'd have like 15 days to remedy. And those items that have been highlighted, the Big 8, as seems to be referred in this conversation, which are the items that garner the most demerits because they are of the highest health risk to anyone who's occupying the school, you are required to fix it, or fix it within 10 days. Now, that being said, 10 days from our perspective would be complete remedy or correction, or in this case, in a normal course of action, a variance request with sort of a substantial plan in order for the director, I would think, to even think to granting a variance or approving a variance for any of the big 6 demerit items. Yeah, and now if a school were to, because of Public Law 37-4, if a school were to not pass inspection, they're ineligible for any variance request at current, which is why that verbiage is being stricken in Bill 156. And so anything that could have been simple, that could have been mitigated, they have to correct it. There's no variance for that right now. So should this bill pass, that does give a little bit of leeway for GDOE to apply for variances, whether they pass, whether they fail. All this, though, if they do fail, requires reinspection, and reinspection would have to be initiated by the school or GDOE that they are ready. We have a form. The same form was submitted when JFK submitted the request for reinspection.
What would you say would be a normal timeline between a failed inspection and a reinspection?
It really varies. I mean, our regulations have specified parameters in terms of time to fix and or apply for the variance and get it approved. But that being said, the other contributing factor is availability of an inspector to go out there and inspect. I mean, the logic is they need to pass, GDOE schools need to pass inspection in order to renew their permit, their sanitary permit. So even though they pass, there's still an obligation of GDOE schools to correct those violations to truly come into full compliance. But it's not necessary, as I read it with the law, to renew your sanitary permit at this point.
Okay. Peter John, I asked this question of you yesterday, the temporary employment of retired Guam inspectors. And the question that I had yesterday was whether there was enough in the budget to be able to provide for those positions. But in this morning, I guess in the hearing, your agency as a whole is dealing with some shortfalls. Were these positions budgeted positions in advance or what? Or how did you intend to fund these? Go ahead.
Actually, Senator, I can answer that just because, yes, public health as a whole has a reduction in their budget requests. That being said, the Division of Environmental Health actually has an increase in its budget from FY23 to FY24 of roughly about $300,000 to $400,000 in total of extra from prior year. So that, coupled with the opportunity to utilize our lapse funds, which we are authorized to do so now that it is a revolving fund, gives us sort of the leeway, because number one, we have people that we need to hire, which we've had open positions for quite some time. But in addition to that, to augment the potential cost of hiring retirees and also bringing back or transferring other employees from other agencies, should that be possible and should they be available. So there is money within our budget, the Division of Environmental Health, to augment these additional expenses. That being said, I would hope that the process come the next school year, come the next year, comes to some sort of realistic flow that will work where we wouldn't always have to tap on that additional help. But either way, we are ready to augment these individuals should we need to.
And, you know, this is very specific, retirement government of Guam employees now, and then also the discussion going back to that in the discussion and in your search for retired government of Guam employees, you know, there's only one person that would be able to fit that category that you can put right into the box and let them perform, right?
We have, so when the bill lapsed into law, on April 1st, we did reach out to quite a few former inspectors at all different levels that we knew that were on island and have retired. We've even reached out to a couple that actually just resigned because they're leaving off island eventually. And there was quite a bit, it was split in half. Some expressed interest, some had to weigh out the amount that they were generating through retirement. I don't know how that actually works, and for them, they declined because for them it was like, no, it would actually cost me more to come back into the government of Guam. So that aside, the individuals that did a soft commitment, things have changed. We're now in August. This is 4 months. Things have changed. And so right now we have a firm confirmation of one with the possibility of a second individual as well. But that's pretty much it in terms of what interest has sparked in our direction.
Okay, how many inspectors do you need per team? You have 3 teams right now, right?
We have 3 teams.
How many inspectors
We
per
have
team?
3 teams, and we have 2 to 3 inspectors per team, depending on, I guess, level of expertise or familiarity with the regulations more so than others. There's some that do this all the time. There's some that have shifted they have been trained, but they have shifted their normal programs that they deal with to focus on school inspections. So those teams would be comprised of 3 inspectors, as well as 2 supplemental, like other staff to assist in counting. So we're looking at a total team composition of 5.
5.
5 members and no more than 3 inspectors per team.
Good luck. Okay. Well, you know, I mean.
We have 3 teams
You
now.
have 3 teams, yeah. Okay, and I think, but I think what we're trying to do here is increase the number of teams, and just based on what you're saying, I mean, and the timelines, I'm just concerned. Okay, I can't equate both sides. Okay, try to figure something out. I'm almost running out of time, but I'll go ahead and okay, Madam Speaker, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Dueñas, round 2.
City of Masi, Madam Chair. I'm going to save you the agony of trying to ask the same question 50 different ways. And that is no aspersion to my colleagues who spoke before me, because they've been very eloquent and they've asked very important questions. But what I am going to do is I'm going to make an overview of my interpretation of the dialogue that's taken place, particularly in this second round. If any one of you disagrees with my interpretation, please feel free to speak up and correct me. First of all, when we came into this session, many of us who wanted to be in the Committee of the Whole wanted to do exactly this. We wanted to ensure that we were not going to manage this crisis by press release. We wanted to make sure that we weren't going to finger point, and we wanted to make sure, many of us, that we were not going to wash our hands. So, operating off of the 4 corners of the bill, which of course doesn't take into consideration outside factors, here are my observations. First of all, it's unconscionable that the Department of Administration continues to hold on to the $20 million that's needed for Department of Education. That, in my opinion, is absolutely unexcusable, and we need to push as hard as we can, because going into the 3rd section of this bill, that would essentially remedy the fact that you have the latitude to use funds and resources that are at your discretion, or that should be at your discretion based on legislative mandate. Mr. Swanson, I want to say that I'm refreshed by your leadership and your willingness to step forward and say straight away that I am taking the bullets, and so I think one of the things that we have to do is try to give you a flak jacket so that you can take those bullets, but take it with a reasonable ability to execute your mission. What I've heard from you is, given lifted barriers that you currently have, the 2 main ones are your inability to bring in those individuals who are currently barred from being on board on campus because of the fact that the law is prohibitive as per inspections, fundamentally. And the other thing is the ability now to work with public health to not have to have a global certification in the schools and be able to modify that in order to be able to, outside of what the current mandate is, operate on schools and campuses and areas that would pass inspection. Am I correct so far, Mr. Swanson, on those two observations?
The observations are accurate, but you need to also understand that in mind, with the use of variances that are named in the bill, that's the tool that gives us the capacity to do that.
And so that's where I'm saying, Mr. Swanson, I believe, and this is leading to my conclusion, I believe that on the four corners of the bill, it falls short of what's absolutely required in order to give you, as I said, I don't want to be stuck in a position, at least from my perspective, one of 15, involved in hand washing and getting myself in a position to where you asked for a pipe wrench and I gave you a screwdriver. That's just my analogy. But I appreciate the fact that you've brought forward that there are things outside of what's currently contained in order to be able to accomplish this mission. We want to ensure that you have everything you need to accomplish your mission because you have stepped forward and basically said you're willing to take on that responsibility. Senator after senator has put before you the opportunity to get to a conclusion that is going to be the conclusion of my comments. What I wanted to see more than anything else, and what I wanted to prove to myself, was that the Department of Education and Department of Public Health are absolutely committed to get the job done. But what you presented to us today is, in my humble opinion, it's a wonderful and noble effort on the four corners of this bill, but you need a lot more. I know many in this body are considering that. We'll take that up when the time comes. But in conclusion, I wanted to say that mission accomplished when, at least from my observation, everyone is committed to this process. Department of Education has come forward and they have delivered on their tiers of the responsibilities of the schools to get through these inspections. They have set it up to where they can work harmoniously with public health to be able to, with the proper leeway, do what they need to do to accomplish this mission. In the end, it comes down to this. It's all the faculty, staff, but more importantly, students and teachers. Parents and students who are at the core of this. There's a bigger solution than this is needed, and that's the way I feel at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start with a timeline because it appears that we're suffering from a collective memory loss in this body, so I wanted to refresh the memories of all those in the People's House as to why we are at this juncture. I want to go back to February 5th. There was an article in the Guam Daily Post about rat infestation, flea infestation, mold infestation at different Guam Department of Education schools. There are also stories about dirty restrooms that weren't being maintained. I had been quoted as saying, if we're issuing a current sanitary permit but we're not inspecting the schools, in my estimation, the sanitary permit is not worth the paper it's written on. On the 14th of February, the Office of the Governor, via Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio, decided to get in on the action and issued a press release, which is still up on the governor's website, which I'd like to share with my colleagues. As you can see right there, it is the Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. Acting Governor engages whole of government to fix schools. Over $100 million available to fix school facilities. The Department of Education's longstanding issues with maintaining facilities require and I'm quoting the acting governor at the time, the current Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. The Department of Education's longstanding issues with maintaining facilities require a whole of government approach where all partners are addressing the various needs of our schools. It's not happening. That was on February 14th. On March 10th, Simon Sanchez High School failed its first public health inspection in 7 years. March 15th, the governor delivered her State of the Island address right here at the Guam Congress Hall. She said, "Senators, if you expect better schools and facilities, do not roll back the BPT." She also said, Senators, there was a time when the Organic Act and the laws of Guam would have made me clearly responsible for the state of public education in Guam. That time no longer exists. Let me be clear. I will take any lawful steps to improve public education in Guam. Fix the procurement law. Raise the salaries of technical staff in bidding and spec writing so they can issue contracts. And give DOE the resources it needs to truly invest in our classrooms. Madam Speaker, your predecessors believe that DOE's fate should be stewarded by the legislature. Only you can show them if they were right. March 20th, emergency session conducted by the 37th Guam Legislature in which we passed Bill 2937, now Public Law 37-4. In this same emergency session, we passed a bill that expedited procurement protests, and we also passed a bill that appropriated $20 million to the Guam Department of Education. Upon the enactment of Public Law 37-4, the Guam Department of Education began months-long weekly meetings with the Department of Public Health and Social Services. In these meetings, because I was briefed about these meetings, and we have been in receipt of variance reports that were submitted to the Guam Legislature as required by Public Law 37-4, and in these 3 months of variance reports as we have received, you can see for yourself that there was plenty of conversation between DOE and Public Health about editing variances, correcting the variances that were submitted, which to me indicates that for 3 months, DOE and Public Health had met, and I don't know about you, but if we can't grant variances, I'm pretty sure that would have come up. And in all this time, we never saw the whole of government approach. Instead of all hands on deck, this administration sadly has chosen to take a hands-off approach when it comes to helping our public school students. Instead, they have lodged press release after press release from the comfort of their newly renovated offices, while we are attempting to hold a standard that our public school students deserve. Had the Guam Department of Education gotten the help, if the administration had chosen to read beyond the section of my law that they had such an issue with, they would have been able to see that we mandated additional resources to obtain compliance. Imagahagan Guahan may transfer personnel and other resources from, but not limited to, the Department of Public Works to assist with preparing procurement-related scope of work preparation, repairs, or other actions deemed necessary to obtain GDOE public school compliance with sanitary permit requirements. Had the whole of government approach, the all hands on deck, the promised lawful help from our governor come, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Instead, the only solution my colleagues can offer is to send our kids back to schools that are not safe. And I refuse to let that happen on my watch. No. We have all agreed in this body to set a new standard, and I believe we should stick to that standard. This is not a cha-cha. We don't take 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back. What we have heard here from the Guam Department of Education is that every aspect of this bill will help them reach compliance. We have also heard from the Department of Public Health and Social Services that they are committed to granting these variances that this bill allows. We have also heard from the superintendent right here on the record that he believes raising the small purchase limit to $250,000 will allow him to address the needs of the Phase 2 schools so that we can move them up to Phase 1, so that we can get them inspected and opened. Will all the schools be open by April 23rd? Probably not, but the Guam Department of Education has again committed here on the record that it is their intention to continue moving forward to reach compliance with Public Law 37-4. And I am not comfortable with the number 2 public health official on our island advocating that we send students back to schools that are not safe. Is that what you're suggesting, Mr. Camacho? As the number 2 public health authority on this island, are you advocating that we send our public school students back to facilities that are not safe? Back to facilities that can't pass public health inspections? Is that what you're advocating? Because I heard you yesterday push for repeal of Public Law 37-4. And I think that's very irresponsible of you as a public health official to advocate for such a thing. Do you care to answer the question, sir?
No, I'm not advocating that we go back to non-compliance with standards.
Are you stating that on the record?
I'm sorry, sir?
Because that's a contradiction from what I heard yesterday.
When I was looking for an opportunity for this process to move forward, but obviously the safety of our children is most important, and the staff and the other folks that have access to the facility.
It boggles my mind that we have an attorney general who is issuing indictments relative to sanitary conditions and the granting of permits at our schools, yet we're discussing going backwards and sending kids into these same conditions. Our parents, our students have demanded this standard. Our teachers have demanded this standard. They understand that we are going to do the work now to once and for all bring our schools into compliance with safety and sanitation guidelines. Is it going to be ugly? Absolutely. But we can't expect our staff and our students to focus on learning and academics when they're going to school in facilities that can't meet the basic safety and sanitation guidelines. When they're going to school in facilities that if these schools were restaurants would be shut down. And I just can't believe that that's what we're advocating. Instead, what we should be advocating is a real all-hands-on-deck approach. We have school aides out there doing contractor work to bring our schools into compliance. When we, in Public Law 37-4, allowed for the assistance of the Department of Public Works, we're not getting that assistance. And instead of pressuring this administration to assist our school children, because every election we always hear, the kids come first, education first. Instead of demanding that we all work together to reach compliance, our solution is to give up the fight and send our kids back to schools that are moldy. We haven't even done the mold mitigation work. Mr. Superintendent, does this bill before you give you tools that you need to help you reach compliance with Public Law 37-4?
Yes, it does.
Does the small purchase limit being raised to $250,000 give you the flexibility you need to procure the supplies you need to address the needs of Phase 2 schools so that they can be inspected and opened for our students?
Yes, it does.
Is it your belief that the variance language in this bill will allow you to work with public health to address the variances that you need so that you can have schools pass inspections, so that you can open schools, so our children can go to these schools that meet basic health and safety sanitation guidelines?
It does give us that ability.
Thank you, sir. We're doing this for our kids. That's all it's about. Our kids deserve a standard that has been in place across the nation, but for some reason not here on Guam. Mr. Superintendent, would we be having this conversation if these were DODEA schools? Would the Department of Defense education activities, I know you used to be with DODEA, would they allow schools to open in these conditions?
No.
I believe our kids outside the fence line deserve the same standard. And that's what we're doing here, is we're trying to keep this basic standard that all of our children, to include my kids who are at a Phase 3 school, Daniel L. Perez Elementary in Jigo, where they had a flea infestation problem. They couldn't even play on the playground. They get off the bus, they walk through the walkway. If it's raining, they get wet because there's no roof. And I'm crying for all our kids. You think our governor and our lieutenant governor are crying right now? No, they're not. Because it looks like they don't give a damn about our public school kids. And this body has shown that we do. Nothing further.
Thank you, Senator.
Speaker Therese, you are recognized on questions for the panel.
Thank you. I just want to echo the sentiment of the previous speaker. That's the bottom line. Maybe we have a philosophical difference in this room. I don't think we have there's not a money issue. There is no money issue to fixing these schools. Public Health has advocated for the implementation of rules and regulations for sanitary conditions. That's it. Not anything extraordinary, but sanitary conditions. We gave DOE 4 years to comply, use their own judgment, but what happened? Are we advocating to go back to that? I am not. I think DOE is doing a great job right now, working their hardest with their limited resources to get things done. And it's really the only way. We're either going to get it done or we're going to end up sending kids online. Those are the options that have been given to us, online or into schools that are not clean, not meeting sanitary requirements. I refuse to go down any of those two options. Even double session, as the superintendent said, is going to be so difficult, a nightmare, ugly, as some of my colleagues say. Ugly, yes. But it's a lot less ugly than postponing the school year, postponing the inspections and allowing kids into those schools that DOE themselves have done self-assessments and have admitted that they are not suitable. Some of them will not be suitable for a while because they need capital improvement projects, and DOE is going to actually finally get those done. And we have been waiting as a community for 20 years in some cases to get those done. So I don't want to go backwards on this, but we have given the Department of Education, they have the ARP $120 million. We gave them $20 million more. The governor took it, is using it for typhoon improvements, but DOE has the ability to submit tickets for those typhoon improvements. So they did. They asked for mold mitigation. It hasn't happened yet. I don't know why. I don't know what we're waiting for. I think they asked for a whole list of other things, and I think they're still waiting on a lot of those. Isn't that correct, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, it's correct.
We gave DOE, over the years, its own procurement authority, emergency appeals for procurement, emergency procurement, hiring authority. They don't even have to wait for DOA like the rest of the government is waiting. Pay raises, that's what the governor also asked for in her State of the Island. The problem of DOE was we needed to give them pay raises. So every single employee who is classified at least at DOE has received pay raises. But that's not been enough to get the schools fixed. So we pass a law to say get the schools fixed now for this school year, not prolong it. And I seem to have heard the same thing, and I'm concerned. So DOE divided the schools into 3 phases. We don't need 41 schools because that's not possible. Not because of their efforts, but it's not possible because you can't fix a roof in the 2 weeks that you have left. But there are schools that we can do things for, and they've listed 14 schools that we can do things for. So 14 schools, can we get those ready? Public Health has stepped up, increased their teams, and they can inspect 14 schools before the beginning of the school year. Today you see you need 50%, 20. This is to prevent online. Can we get 20? I'm pushing Public Health, and I hope that they can get 20 with this bill, that they can inspect 20 schools, and we can do double sessions for all of them as opposed to, or not even, if not necessary, but double session instead of online, or instead of letting them into unsafe schools. So, Francine, Public Health. You said that you think the governor has the ability to detail employees right now.
That is my understanding of her transfer authority or detail authority of any classified employee to other agencies, yes.
And isn't it correct that there are Department of Environmental Health inspectors who have moved to other agencies who would be ready to assist you in these if the governor detailed them to your agency?
That is correct as well, Speaker. There are those currently employed former environmental health inspectors do exist and are working in other agencies, yes.
And if you got the one retiree, that would be 2 inspectors ready to create a team. That would allow us 4 teams. And if you do the math, but DOE is not ready for 4 teams today. So you have been able to meet their demand for inspections and try to open the schools. And so what we're trying to do is to help you meet their demand in case they are ready with more schools. And we are trying to give them every tool and continue, and not move backwards, but continue to give them everything we can to move forward in their repair while you move forward with your inspections. Simple as that. I don't think, Mr. Superintendent, can you please clarify? You said, I want to know whether you want this bill or you want us to make a blanket waiver to have professional development classes on campus, or do we want to make the campuses, while they have mold, mind you, or do we want to prepare those campuses for school? You've got 20 million up there in the D-land. Why not ask for that money to send your teachers to a hotel for professional development, or send them to Adelup, send them anywhere? If that's the problem, money should not ever be your problem. But I don't agree to send teachers into schools for professional development when they have mold and they've been declared unsafe. If they're safe, yes, do it. But do you want that ability? The teachers are already allowed, according to Public Health, to come in and help with the repairs so that they can get inspected. Help with the failed schools and help them to pass. So do you want the bill to help you with the money part? I mean, not the money even, it's just the procurement level. And as you said earlier, this matches with the federal procurement level. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But DOE is already operating under this procurement level with all of that $120 million. They've been trusted to do that. And I trust you're going to do that because these schools, you are doing it. And so I guess I just want to be clear. Do you need that or do you not? The $250,000 capacity for small purchases? Or do you want us to stop all of this and allow you to bring teachers into the moldy schools? Not to help you clean them up, but for professional development. Because I'm sorry, but I'm afraid there's some mixed messages here.
I apologize for mixed messages. The need is, yes, we need that threshold, $250,000, because it's a matter of which color is the money and what rules apply to what the sources are. And to be very clear, I don't want to put any of our staff or students in situations that are unsafe and unhealthy. Well, I don't want to do that at all. And as far as DLAN money to use for training conferences elsewhere, I didn't even think that was legal. But my man here will keep me straight and keep me out of trouble on that score, but because he's an auditor by heart. So we need the provisions of the bill. And I will acknowledge that whatever the opening looks like, it will be difficult. And hopefully it will be short-lived if we can get the work done that we need done.
Yes, that's what I'd love to hear. That even though it's ugly on day one because everybody's double sessioning, we're going to progress and continue to fix, continue to inspect, and continue to open more schools.
That's correct. We're
Thank you.
not going to let up.
Thank you. Situs Masi.
Thank you, Speaker. At this time, colleagues, we have just completed round 2. We will take a moment's recess so that we can ask to excuse the panel member, but want to extend our Dankluna Situs Masi for taking your time out here to come and answer all the questions by my colleagues. So, Situs Masi, we are in recess.
We're back from recess. We are about to begin round 3, which is for amendments or final comments on the bill. We can go around the room. There's only one amendment in the drive, so that's the only amendment that will be entertained. There's an amendment by Senator San Agustin. Please confirm that you have it. If not, raise your hand so that the Sarge can make sure that one is passed out. It was passed out earlier. Maybe it was passed out yesterday. All right, so if copies of the amendment could be passed. While we're waiting for that, Senator Taitakui, did you want to have any comments on round 3?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity. I think there was a lot of conversations that here that was about helping the school children and, trying to get them in school without any delay, and there are circumstances, but I think that we here as a body have solutions to proffer, and not just this bill, but other bills that may come down the pipeline. And I just thank the public health and DOE for the first time coming together in one place. So can we really talk to them both and have our questions answered? I greatly appreciate that. I think it's very helpful too for the public who is watching to be able to understand what kind of predicament that we are in right now. And I think this body can find different solutions, and it's hopefully the best one will prevail. So I thank you for the opportunity, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Fisher, on round 3, final comments?
No, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Senator. Senator Canetas waving his time. Senator San Agustin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one amendment, and it's listed as B156 JSA. Got RABQ, TRMP, DSN, L10, P3, COTW. And all this is very simple. It's to add a new section. The GDOE leads schools waiver, the requirements of Article 7, Chapter 4, Division 1 of Title 26 of the Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations are hereby waived for all lease schools of the Department of Education. Requirements shall be fulfilled pursuant to such lease agreement. And my colleagues, throughout the first and second round, DOE and Public Health had no problem because they knew that if there's anything as a result of the typhoon, then they're going to repair it. But anything that is added on that was never added part of the lease, then of course, that's what they're asking the waiver for. And they'll be in compliance, and they'll be able to fix the schools. And that's all they're asking for, right? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on that same effort, I'd like to thank the author of the amendment for including me in this amendment that has been proffered. I want to say that in the efforts of this, knowing that the lease schools already have a contract, when these schools were being built, the maintenance component and the operations of that would go through the conditions as already stated in the lease agreement. So I think that this amendment is in order, and I ask my colleagues to support the same. Si Jus Masi, I stand in support, and again ask my colleagues to support this amendment. Sana Masi.
Sana Masi. So on the amendment, anyone want to be recognized on the amendment? On the amendment, Senator Barnett on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in talking with the Guam Department of Education, they have expressed to me that they've been disappointed with the efforts by the lease schools to come into compliance with Public Law 37-4. Now granted, one of the lease schools, John F. Kennedy High School, passed their second public health inspection, but just to give my colleagues a little more information, on some of the other leased schools. Now, there's the other group of leased schools, I believe it's Ukadu, Snumbo Elementary, Atacao, League One Elementary. Now, according to my conversations with GDOE leadership, all of these schools are suffering from similar issues. Yes, some of it related to typhoon damage, but also in the estimation of the GDOE leadership, many of the issues with these leased schools deal with a lack of routine maintenance. And I'm just of the opinion that, and I'm not sure that I agree that Public Law 37-4 places any new mandates on these leased schools. I know that GDOE believes that the leased schools should be responsible and are responsible for maintaining their facilities to a certain standard. So I don't think that the law requires these schools to do anything above and beyond what they are already supposed to do and what they are not doing. Remember, these are schools that should be able to afford the work that is required to come into compliance with Public Law 37-4. And so with that, I lodge my opposition to this amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Burnett. Senator Fisher on the amendment as proffered by Senator San Augustine.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I suppose I sit to a point of inquiry here.
Please state your question.
Thank you very much.
Can you speak into the mic, Senator Fisher? I apologize.
Like that?
Yes, sir.
Oh, right on. Does the education chair have any idea why the Department of Education is not enforcing the lease requirements? From what I just heard, it sounds like they are in breach of contract, and is GDOE doing anything to enforce it?
I will ask the chair. Would you like to answer that, sir?
I would yield to the question, Madam.
do.
As one of the GDOE deputies testified in the committee of the whole, I believe it was yesterday, he said that GDOE legal is actually reviewing this issue, and so again, I would just caution that I just have difficulty moving forward with this amendment because we're trying to apply a waiver to these lease schools, and these lease schools are responsible for maintaining these campuses. So, and they have the means to maintain these campuses. And remember, we have held these leaseback schools up, right? We have said, oh, the leaseback school should be able to pass the inspection, and we saw with John F. Kennedy High School. Granted, it was a little different circumstances because they were inspected really soon after Typhoon Mawar, so I don't believe that they were ready for that. And they failed, they passed subsequently. But again, GDOE is of the opinion, and I am too, that these leaseback schools have the means to maintain their facilities. They just haven't been doing that.
Thank you.
And that's
Fisher,
according
you still have the
to
floor.
GDOE, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Madam Vice Speaker, just to follow up on that, just reverse the question. If we institute 156-37 with its new terms, are we now in breach in regard to the leaseholders?
I will ask the author, the oversight chair if he'd like to yield. Do you want him to restate the question?
Could he?
Restate the question, Senator.
It's just the other side of the coin. If we add new conditions to the lease by law through 156-37, are we in breach? Because we have corresponding obligations, and we can't just, contracts, we can't just add things in.
Senator Barnett.
Ma'am, I know that the Guam Department of Education and their legal team is reviewing this issue, and again, I would just state on the record that they were disappointed with the pace of with the efforts at some of these leaseback schools to include GDOE staff even performing maintenance tasks that the entities that we're leasing these schools from should have been doing. So again, the issue is under review with GDOE and their legal, ma'am. I hope that satisfies the asker of the question.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'd just be really reluctant to move if we're going to place ourselves in breach. It sounds like GDOE doesn't have an opinion on it, but caution. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else on the amendment? Anybody else on the amendment? Senator San Nicolas, I will recognize you on the San Augustine amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the amendment. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator Frank Blush, you are recognized. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, one of the author of the amendment can yield to a question, and the question being, as it reads right now, the administrative rules and regulations are hereby waived for all these schools, but then it goes on to say requirements shall be fulfilled pursuant to lease contract. What are we waiving and what are we requiring?
I will ask the senator. Senator San Augustine, would you like to yield to that question?
Yes, well, I can only answer so much. When I spoke to a few of them, they said that there were some requirements, like when they first built the school, they said that the bathroom doors there's no bathroom doors. This is the way it's configured to maintain safety so they can access the restroom for emergency or whatever. And then now they added requirements. No, now you got to put a door. Then they said things like the drop ceiling. It's got to be a certain drop ceiling when at the time when the school was built, these were what they needed to be in compliance. Then all of a sudden now they're changing it. They're willing to work with whatever they can, but you can't be expecting them to do things overnight and then be blamed that you failed to maintain. Wait a minute. And as I heard earlier, they're saying that they could have breached. Well, if they breached, then DOE should have done something. And exactly what my other colleague said, that if we cause a law to change their lease, we may be in jeopardy of that. So all I'm asking for in this amendment is just to waive this part and then let them get fixed, and it maintains that the requirements shall be fulfilled pursuant to the lease. So whatever's on their lease, they have to fulfill. And that's the maintenance, fixing, and whatever they need to fix. But at least on the Article 7 of Chapter 4, Division 1, they be waived from that. Very simple. Thank you.
Senator Blas, does that answer?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Anybody else on the San Augustine amendment? There has been an opposition to your amendment, Senator San Augustine. Would you like
Madam
to close?
Chair, may I just offer a point of information that according
State
to
your
the...
point of information,
just
please.
to provide this information to my colleagues, that a few of these leaseback schools, specifically Liguan Elementary, Estumbo Middle School, are currently on phase 3 and discussion with Ms. Francine from Public Health. She showed me pictures from Attica, which was overrun with mold. So by passing this amendment, we are allowing our students to go back into phase 3 schools that not only are likely to not pass public health inspections, but that I believe would pose imminent health and safety risk to our students.
Senator Terlahi, on the amendment.
Thank you. I understand, we want to only require what's required by a lease, not put any additional obligations on the schools. But I think this would actually have the opposite effect, because right now, DOE, they can enforce their lease, and the lessors, they can definitely enforce their lease. They have the means to do it. We are paying them lease payments every year, and the government of Guam, the taxpayers, are paying for maintenance. So I think that if DOE has any rights to enforce that they should. And I cannot imagine that they were ever exempt from sanitary rules and regulations of the government of Guam. And that the government of Guam, by that lease, was not allowed to update its sanitary rules and regulations for the 30-year lease. And this amendment, unfortunately, would not be waiving just, for example, the door requirement at JFK, which, by the way, they fixed. Those contractors, they came in, the lessor, they came in and they fixed it. So I think that shows that is what they're supposed to do, and they should have been doing it all along. But my issue is that this amendment would waive every rule and regulation, every sanitary rule and regulation, even if, it waives them all, the entire chapter. That's exactly what we're trying to prevent. We don't want to waive that for any school students. And I think much less the ones who are in the brand new schools. They should be entitled to the cleanest spaces on Guam. And I don't want to take that away from them, and I don't want to diminish in any way DOE's ability to demand that from them. And they are doing that. They even raised this at the round table that we had with the Attorney General regarding schools, and they said, you know, we're going to be meeting with the schools. And the Attorney General, if I remember correctly, said, if you have any issues with that, you call me to help them to enforce. So the things that I understand is that these schools are not able to pass inspection, and we would be waiving that for them. And the issues that they have, I do not think are safe. They have mold, as the previous speaker said, but they also have, I asked Public Health about this, they have vector issues. Vector to me is the infestation. That's the nice word that they use for infestation at Astumbo. That's why Astumbo's on phase 3. They have severe issues. And I'm asking my colleagues, why are we, the government of Guam, who's paying money to these people, going to waive that requirement of them to make sure that there are no infestations in their schools and not doing the opposite? These are companies making money off of us, and we're going to give them a big break. I don't understand that. We should be doing the opposite. We should be demanding, why didn't they fix that? That's not a typhoon problem. That looks like it must have been a problem that the students were actually living with. So I'm just asking, let's not make our kids go to the unsanitary schools that they're unsanitary. They're infested. They've got mold. Let's not do that. Just maybe these companies are our friends. We have friends in these companies, but I don't think that's the reason to take care of them. We need to take care of the students. Nobody is going to stand up for them except for us. And so I think we should help DOE stand up to them. And I cannot imagine that they've ever been exempt from sanitary rules, or that we want any school, lease school or any kind, to open without a sanitary permit. That's what waiving this chapter says. You don't need a sanitary permit. Please, let's not do that. So I rise in objection to this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Therese. On the amendment, Senator San Augustine to close. Senator Tello, on the San Augustine amendment, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for my colleagues for, commenting on this particular bill. I had to read this like 3 times to try and understand, to make sure that, one, we are not giving up our the rights for this company, the leaseor, or the leasee, leaseor, yeah, leaseor, right? Lessor, to not provide, a safe environment for our children. And then reading, just think the way it was written is not very clear. I understand what the author is trying to do for this particular amendment, but the way it's written, when you have schools of the Department of Education, then requirements shall be fulfilled. I mean, that's where I think we have an issue here, to make it clear and define that all requirements pursuant to the lease contract shall still remain in effect. Now that sounds a little bit better, right? It's basically what it is, but it just, requirements shall be fulfilled pursuant to such lease contracts. I think that's why, and then you putting a semicolon there, and it does not, I think it should be separated. But if I could get just a short recess to talk with the author of the amendment, to
We're in a moment's recess.
Yeah, thanks.
Y mina 37 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. When we took the moment's recess, we're with Senator Tello. You are recognized still.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, after speaking with the author of the amendment, I think that we've come to a great solution. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. With that being said, I will yield back to the author of the amendment, Senator San Augustine.
Madam Chair, I'd like to withdraw my amendment and introduce another amendment.
We have a motion to, by Senator San Augustine to withdraw an amendment and for him to proffer another one. I will allow that. On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Senator San Augustine, I'll still recognize you for your new amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment has been passed out, and we worked with legal on this to make sure we're in line. And all it changes, the requirements of Article 7, Chapter 4, Division 1 of Title 26 of the Guam Administrative Rules and Regulations are hereby waived for all public schools leased by the Department of Education. The lessor and lessee of each leased public school shall comply with the maintenance, repair, and other applicable requirements contained in the lease, in effect as of the effective date of the lease. And several of my colleagues were able to review the contract. And I'm not promoting dirty schools. I never have. I was on the school board. I've always fought for cleaner schools. So, anyway, moving along, that's my amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
On that motion, does anybody have an objection to the motion? To his amendment, Senator San Augustine's new amendment? He withdrew the other amendment, Speaker Talahi, and then he has a new one. So I'm gonna ask, does anyone wish to speak? It's the one that adds the provision that the lessee or lessees of each leased public school shall comply with the maintenance, repair, and other applicable requirements contained in the lease in effect as of the effective date of the lease. Senator Roy, on the amendment.
Can we call for the vote?
I do apologize that it's not a motion. I will still, Senator Talahi, are you going to speak on the amendment? On the amendment.
Thank you. So the amendment says that the requirements of Article 7 of Chapter 4, Division 1, Title 26 of the Administrative Rules and Regulations are waived for all public schools that are leased. That means that all of the sanitary rules and regulations and the requirement that schools get a sanitary permit will be waived for all schools that are leased. Not just, for all schools that are leased. And
that would be the 6 leased schools, Madam.
That's correct. 6 leased schools. These are the schools that the government of Guam and the people of Guam, through tax money, are paying to be maintained. We don't necessarily pay for maintenance at all the other schools. We're relying on parents, teachers, principals to put their sweat in there and try to make a decent place for their kids to go to school. But these places, who we are paying in one school $650,000 a year for maintenance and insurance, we're either trying to save these companies the maintenance funds so they can keep it, or we're trying to save some insurance companies insurance costs or from paying out on insurance claims. Who are we trying to take care of here? Because this amendment is not addressing any requests of the Guam Department of Education, and it's not making the schools safer. It's doing the opposite. It's when the Department of Education is trying to enforce that these schools not have mold or rats, that we are going to give them a big exemption to have rats and mold. And we're going to take away Department of Education, what they're right in the middle of is enforcing that. And they've been successful, because that's why JFK on reinspection was passed, because they were forced to do the required maintenance. So we're not giving to DOE what they need, we're taking away from DOE. We're taking our students out of safety and putting them in schools that don't require safety sanitary permits. I don't even know if that's legal, let alone conscionable. I think we're doing the opposite. Who are we taking care of? We're taking care of these people who are making the millions of dollars off of the government of Guam. We're going to take care of them and put our children into schools that do not have to meet these requirements, while we ask our principals and teachers and parents to go to those older schools and deal with broken plumbing on your weekends and fix the doors with your money on your weekends. Find your own contractors. That's what they've been doing all these years. These are the special schools where we are paying the millions of dollars to get them fixed. Always. Even after typhoons. That's why the insurance clauses. And if you in one sentence say they're going to abide by the terms of the lease, but in another sentence waive them from sanitary rules and regulations and the requirement that schools get sanitary permits, don't try to fool the people. It's not making the schools safer, it's making them less safe, and it's taking care of somebody who wants to save money.
Madam Speaker, I rise to a point of inquiry.
Pardon?
Do you have a point of inquiry?
I'm
State your-
speaking, Madam Speaker. They can do that after I'm done.
Madam Speaker, if I may, on a point of
Inquiry.
order and inquiry, please state your point.
Thank you, ma'am. Does the current speaker, Terlahi, does she believe in the concept of sanctity of contract?
Madam Speaker, I think that is absolutely out of order to interrupt somebody who's speaking
Senator
to ask
Speaker,
a
you have
frivolous
the
question.
You have the floor. Based on the guidelines,
If there's sanctity of contract, then they can enforce their contract. And if they can't,
Okay.
then that's their problem. But they should be able to enforce it, and I believe that they will fight DOE on every nickel and dime. If this is the case, that they are going behind DOE's back and lobbying these senators in here to give them a big, huge waiver. For what purpose?
Thank you for
It's
yielding,
not for the
Speaker. You can
students.
proceed. You can proceed. Thank you for yielding. You still have the floor.
If we want the contract to be enforced the way it is, then leave it alone. But again, the legislature wants to jump itself into the middle of potential litigation and for the benefit of the people who are making money off of the government of Guam as opposed to the students. And continue to tell our parents and students and principals to suffer and let these people who have the money and the means and the insurance contracts to cover the damages to the school, we're going to say, no, we're waiving the requirement that you should not have mold. We're waiving the requirement that you should not have rats. What has happened here? I think it's petty politics, very bad policy for the government of Guam. And really a stab in the back to DOE and those principals and teachers who have been working their entire families on their weekends to get these schools ready.
Thank you, Speaker Terlai. There has been a new amendment as proffered by Senator Sinogstein. Anyone else wishing to speak? Senator Joanne Brown, I will recognize you at this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I mean, you know, in these meetings that we've had and oversights with Department of Education, this is one of the questions that certainly I've and other colleagues have raised, was the concern we had about the schools that we have contracted out with these lease agreements to address the maintenance and cleanliness of these schools. And, you know, on the first round, Department of Education informed us that none of these schools passed inspection. which is very concerning. And in one case, in particular, we were told up at Tiedzin that as a result of the typhoon, water entered into the classrooms, and I guess there was mold as a result of it, that they said, and again, this is what was told to us by the DOE representatives, is that they were told that that was not part of their lease agreement, and that they would need to provide additional funding for the contractor to address removing the mold, which to me, I'm like, if you own the building, and I'm leasing the building, I mean, I expect the building to be maintained to a certain standard so that I can operate in the building. In this particular case, the intent is to have our children in the classroom. I'm not an attorney, and of course, perhaps I can understand agreements being made, but I don't know how agreements can be made contrary to Guam law. That includes the authority of public health to conduct these inspections to ensure that these facilities meet a desired standard. So in this particular case, I have to say I don't mind the second sentence in this particular amendment. I don't care for the first sentence in this amendment and the message that it's sending out that we are waiving these requirements. Because I, of course, at least from my view of it, if we are paying all this additional money, and again, this whole idea is being touted. This whole idea is being touted for Simon Sanchez, that not only should we build the new facility, but we should include a lease agreement for the maintenance of the facility so that we don't end up falling back to these challenges that we're facing today with the traditional process of having these schools not meeting the requirements that we would like to see. This has made me pause, and I did ask the DOE administration who in Department of Education is going out and inspecting to verify that whatever the lease agreement is and deliverables that are supposed to be maintained, the regular cleanliness and other things of maintenance, who's doing that? And they said, well, the school principal. Well, that doesn't really help me. I mean, give me that job. I want my checklist, and we'll get in our car and we will drive to our 6 lease schools and we will go down the list. I'd love that job. Gosh, I could do that without much effort and get paid. Wow, what a deal. So I have concern about this, because if we're going to pay this additional money, the fact that these lease schools, and again, I understand it was brought to our attention that JFK, the doors weren't opening, they were opening in the opposite direction. Then I'm going to come back to the government of Guam and say, well, who at Public Health authorized and signed off on the building permit? Because that's a question you got to ask, because they would have had to sign off and concur on the construction of that facility. So I just, if our public schools down south, part of our traditional process, in-house cleaning, can get their, passing grade, then I don't understand why these lease-back schools, all 6 of them, did not fly through these inspections. And maybe there are other quirks, like the direction the door is opening in. I don't know why it has to be one way versus the other, but nevertheless, I think we'd have an expectation that if we're going to pay this additional money, if we're going to sell this idea that having these contracted schools, having it built, and then having a contract attached to it to do the maintenance is the way to go, then we would expect better performance. And also that DOE management now, I think they've been put on notice, at least I hope so now, that they prioritize, because I'm dumbfounded. I don't want to have to manage DOE. Administratively from the legislature, that's not our role. But for goodness sakes, that is something that should have been part of the requirements, so that we know that the work is being performed and that the money's being paid, that we're getting the deliverables that we need. I think that's very, it's very basic. So I have reservations again with regards to this proposed amendment. And I just want to make sure that if we're paying for it through these contracts, or we're paying for it by hiring someone in the school to do it, that they're doing the job that we're paying for. I think that's an expectation our people would have. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the
Senator
opportunity
Brown.
to comment.
Senator Sanagasi, I understand you have a...
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'll recognize you at this time.
Is this closing,
at
Madam
this
Speaker?
point,
Is this closing?
no, I'm not closing.
No?
I'm speaking now, Madam Speaker.
Yeah.
Let me speak, and then you can speak if you want.
No.
But I've been recognized. Thank you.
Didn't he speak on the amendment?
No, sir. Ma'am, he proffered the amendment, but I was told that he was going to give another motion. Is the
Yes.
motion in place?
Yes,
You
and
may
but-
proceed,
but
given the time, Madam Speaker.
But I wanted to make a statement first when I'm going to make that motion. Number one, okay, my motion is to withdraw the amendment because, you know, when there's a breach of the contract, exactly like our last colleague said, there's a contract, fulfill it. It was never about allowing kids to go to school that were moldy. It's not about allowing kids to go to school and repair it by their parents. No, it's about making sure that whatever contract the government signed at the time, they fulfill it. Now, when it comes down to getting schools fixed, I have a copy of the lease. I will be presenting it to everyone, but I'm going to go ahead and withdraw it. And everybody that wants to talk about who am I trying to protect, I'm trying to protect the government of Guam. Because when there's a breach and we get sued, get ready. We need to find the money to cover. Okay, and with that, I withdraw the amendment so we don't have to discuss this any further. I'm here for the kids.
On the motion to
Thank
withdraw the amendment, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. On the main motion, Senator Roy Canata, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to recess until 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Objection.
There is an objection.
Call for the...
All those in
Madam
favor?
Speaker, we're here for emergency session. We're done with our comments on the bill. I say we wrap up the bill.
There
All we
has
need-
been an objection. All those in favor of the recess to 8 o'clock tomorrow, signify by raising your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion fails. Senator Tello, on the main motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to recess until 9 a.m.
There has been a motion to recess till 9 a.m.
Objection.
There is an objection. All those in
Again,
favor?
Madam Speaker, all that's left is if there's any final comments, and if there's not, then to vote on the bill.
There is a motion on the floor, Speaker
Objection.
Chalahi. There is an objection. It's not debatable.
Objection.
All those in favor? There is an objection. I already noted that. Please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion carries.